Are you talking shift? We are. It's time for the We're Talking Shift podcast. Now. Here to talk shift, Loree Bischoff. We're Talking Shift.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 59 of We're Talking Shift, the podcast where I talk a lot of shift because I believe that when we feel stuck, when it's time to level up or rise to a challenge, we have to make a shift, starting with our thinking. That is the antidote to feeling stuck. I am very, very excited to introduce my guest today because he's going to talk with us about unique ways of looking at and understanding something that we all have in common and love, music. Bill Protzmann is a man on a serious mission to raise awareness of the power of music as self-care. He is a successful IT entrepreneur who holds magna cum laude degrees in piano performance and creative writing, and he brings music to audiences in non-traditional ways. In 2011, he launched Music Care, Inc., a for-purpose corporation that teaches practical ways music can be used for self-care. His work was recognized by the National Council for Behavioral Health with an Award of Excellence in 2014. Now, that's a big deal, you guys. That award is the behavioral health equivalent of winning an Oscar. Insert round of applause here. Yay! His volunteer work has included board positions with Guitars for Vets and the San Diego Veterans Coalition. He has been instrumental in connecting thousands of military service members and veterans with honor tickets to the largest healing music organization in his town, the San Diego Symphony. The American Music Therapy Association, along with many other organizations, are blown away by his keynote presentations. He has tons of articles online at Psychology Today, Fox News, Your Tango, the Good Men Project, and several others. He's here today to inspire and enlighten us about the power of music as a tool for self-care. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Welcome to We're Talking Shift, Bill. I am so glad to have you here today.
I'm just laughing because I love the name of your podcast so much.
Yeah, We're Talking Shift. You like that? You ready to talk shift?
Oh, yeah, you bet. You bet. Bring it.
Yeah, awesome. It is kind of fun. We get to have a lot of fun with that. And but you know, it catches your attention. It gets to the point, right?
It does. It does.
Bill, I am seriously fascinated by what you're doing with music because even though I'm not a musician, I don't sing. Well, I do, but that's between me and God. And I've never played a musical instrument, but I've always recognized the power of music to affect our state, like I'm sure a lot of people. And so it makes sense that there's this huge power in music that hasn't really been exploited for our benefit when it comes to self-care and our health. And that's just one of the things that I think is so cool about of the many things that you're doing, but it's pretty much, you know, based in your belief in the power of music for self-care and healing, right?
Very true. Yes. And that's sort of like the overarching principle that keeps me alive. I mean, really, it's mm-hmm. when you recognize something like that, it's like seeing God for the first time or whatever it is. When that comes home to you, it just becomes a part of who you are, and music certainly is a part of that for me.
Yeah, you started playing piano, I read, when you were 3, I believe, and you grew up playing and performing, and it said that you realized very early on that the discipline of playing the piano was also a behavioral healthcare practice. So I think that's a pretty amazing recognition. And I'm wondering, how old were you when you had that brilliant awareness? And what made you think of that and really start to realize that?
Well, when you're a little kid playing the piano, one of the things that is really important for little kids at like piano parties and all that is that people show them appreciation. And I've been to so many events for my kids where I've been there to support them and show them that appreciation. And when you're making music, that's there. but something else is there too, because sometimes people in the audience react emotionally. One little piano party we had, our piano teacher was moving away to some other state, and after I played, I was the last one on the program, I stood at the piano and bowed like we're taught to do, and I looked over at her, of course, as little kids do, make sure that everything was fine, that they did an okay job. And she was smiling and clapping, but something else was happening. There were big tears rolling down her face. And that stuck with me. It's like, how can human beings be happy and sad at the same time? So those little sort of moments that get into you give you an awareness that something bigger is happening than just making music.
Yes.
And as a teenager, I found, I was pretty depressed as a teenager and for a lot of my life, but I found that at the piano, when I was making music and finding the big emotions to perform into it, that it was okay, that I was safe there, that it felt good, actually, to be able to make this incredibly powerful music. But I didn't translate into how I could have those big emotions safely, like in real life. So I became aware that something was happening to me at the piano. What that was and what was actually going on, we're just getting to the place in the research community where I think they can explain with absolute credible evidence that the music that is going on is having this effect, this behavioral health care, it's actually physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, the whole thing, it's all there in the music. And they're just scratching the surface of that now. But it's so amazing to know that I was safe at the piano with my big emotions as a teenager.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so, anybody that, and most of us, human beings, since, as far back as we know, there have been human beings, there have been some way, shape, or form in all cultures of some kind of music, right? So we know that it's a powerful thing that connects all of us, that we all gravitate toward. There's an effect that comes from music that's beyond just enjoying the sound. There's something else there.
Yeah.
And and I love reading and just learning about energy, and I think that we're energetic beings, which means we're vibrational beings, and music is vibrational. It's a vibration, and I'm wondering if I'm wondering a lot of things, but my question for you around this is, do you think that we gravitate toward music that's a vibrational match to whatever sort of energetic or vibrational state that we're in at any given time? Does that make sense, my question?
It does. And I like to qualify that with a yes and. So one of the things that we've learned to do, which is sadly not such a great thing, is we've learned to sort of minimize emotions we don't like to feel.
Yeah.
And that may or may not be a really great thing. I think if you went to psychology, they'd say it's a really bad thing to stuff your big emotions, because eventually they're going to leak out and they may cause you some sort of psychological damage. But then you go to the positive psychology people and they say, oh no, it's all about being, happy and joyous and whatever. And they don't have a real answer for what happens with those big emotions. So if leaving the judgment out of it for a second. So to get to your yes, if you hear something that makes you feel a way that you like to feel, oh my gosh, that resonates. That, we like that.
Yeah.
But if you hear something and it makes you feel a way that you don't want to feel, that's where the issue comes up. And that's where I'm saying qualified yes. It's my contention that we ought to feel those things when we hear them. So if music makes us frightened or music makes us angry, and we don't like fear and anger, I still feel that we need to experience those emotions, and that music can let us do that safely, even though we'd rather not.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I get that. So really, I'm wondering, would you have to have the discernment to know if you are listening to something that is evoking those feelings that maybe you should be expressing and you're repressing them, but there's certain music that you don't like because it's bringing those up. And so maybe that would be like a very therapeutic use of it, so that to help you express it, right? But then makes total sense. What about, like, I wonder about the flip side, which would be if music has the power to put you in state and hold you in state, that's great if it's positive. But what if, let's say you are in a state of depression,
yes,
and deep sadness and despair, and you're already feeling it because you're there. So would you then want to listen to music that promotes those feelings and keeps you in that state? Or are you actually then sort of, you know what I mean, doing yourself a disservice? Would you then want to listen to something that would maybe be more uplifting to bring your vibration up and help you maybe find a less, sad state?
Yeah. To be something more like what you want versus what you don't want. Nobody wants to feel chronically depressed. And, as a kid, I was. In fact, for most of my adult life, I was. Still am in some ways. So let's take that straight on. The trouble that I had, and I'll speak from my own experience. I think if anybody's listening, you can sort of play this in your own experience and see how it works for you. But the trouble that I had was that in my house growing up, we weren't allowed to be too expressive. We weren't allowed to be too sad or too happy. There was this narrow range of emotion that was there. And I had a Midwestern father and stiff upper lip and all that. And men are kind of taught to put our big emotions aside and not let them influence us too much.
Right.
So I learned pretty early on that when I was not at the piano, I had to stuff my emotions. Okay, that's great. But over time, you stuff them and stuff them and stuff them, and then they begin to leak out. Mm-hmm. And in my case, my depression started to leak out as anger, and that wasn't good. So when I finally got around to therapy in my 30s, I began to understand what was going on and how I'd collected this giant sort of unused reservoir of depression. And I'm a musician. My job is to let it out, right? I have to go to deep emotions. So letting it out at the piano was fine, but I had so much in there that I didn't have a way of really unpacking it.
Yeah.
And it was becoming more and more difficult to drag this giant tank of unused emotions around behind me. It was weighing me down.
Yeah.
So when I began to focus my intention on how to let that depression and anger go, I found that I could very safely soundtrack it. I could put it to music. And as I put it to music, it would relieve me of some of that depression and some of that anger. And it would leave me in a place where I could choose what to feel next. So instead of intervening on top of it, oh, I'm angry, I better play some peaceful music. Right. I would say, oh my gosh, I am angry. Let me just sit down here for a minute and put on some music that lets me feel good and angry without having a requirement to go act out on it or, do something. And the amazing thing, so this is the crazy thing, Loree, allowing that anger or allowing that depression moved it. It moved it through. And it left me with all kinds of great energy at the end.
So it almost acted like a container for you to put it in.
Yeah. And send it away.
Yeah, and then take it, haul it away, right?
Right.
So it brought you kind of back to almost neutral. So you were in a place to be able to feel something better.
Exactly right, and neutral's cool. I mean, I love that place.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in neutral, you're not just flat; you're energized and you're ready to move in any direction, and emotionally nimble.
Yeah,
and that's really great. And so get this, I love what you said about resonators. As a human being, we all of us, we all resonate for sound and rhythm. And if we did that without judgment and just allowed whatever, and then tried to investigate whatever the emotion to see if it had some content or meaning or purpose for us, I think we'd be a lot further along than we are, generally speaking. Looking around, there's all this anger on social media, and I wonder how much of that is just bottled up stuff or an actual existential threat to people who think that their way of life is being challenged, or whatever. What's the emotional content really there to do? It's sort of demanding to be released, right?
Yeah. And like, to use your example of social media, it's, that's a place where people can unpack their discomfort that may not have anything to do even with what they're talking about. It may just be, it may just be an outlet that, and they're projecting some other, politics is that's a great example because it's just so easy and everybody can relate to it. So if you've got, and I saw this, this is a great example because I saw this happen with my mom, who became, before she died, she was getting sick with cancer, although we really didn't know it at the time. But she had a lot of frustrations that had been building up, I think, over the course of probably her entire life, but was really building and building and building. And all of a sudden she got to this point where when I would call her, she would have like this venting session about, the politics and, everything that goes along with that, which was very unlike her and very unusual and very out of character for her. And I thought, well, that is odd. But what I came to realize later was that it really wasn't that. That was just, it was her other discomfort and frustrations and resentments and built up stuff over probably the course of her whole life that she had repressed, and it was being projected in that direction, something that she could safely vent about and, and just rail about and have a session that relieved some energy, but she wasn't relieving the stuff that was, really percolating inside of her.
Right.
It was just, she was projecting on that. And I think that, that's what happens with social media. A lot of times people are having all of, issues in their own lives, but it comes out directed at other things because then they don't really have to deal with the stuff that needs to be dealt with. It's just, there's a different target. You know what I mean?
I do. And which of course is why I'm a big advocate for music, because if you put on headphones and sit there and listen, it's not going to impact anyone else.
Right.
For at least a little while.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's magic in that listening too, because, songs are not one way or the other. They're not happy or sad. Songs have all these emotions built in that cover the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
And while you might feel predominantly sad about a song that's, say, about unrequited love or something, there's also other feelings that are allowable in that space because that's how we are. We don't feel just one thing. We feel a spectrum of things regularly. And we don't even have to work on that. I mean, that's just who we are. We allow those feelings. It's non-binary. It's this rainbow of available emotion that is packed into sound and rhythm, and allowing that sound and rhythm, you're going to feel it all, or some portion of it, or whatever you need. I mean, the information is there to give you a way forward. Is a good way of saying it. I mean, when I'm stuck, music will always give me a way forward. And oftentimes that comes from processing emotions that have been suppressed, or it can come from just an idea that I don't know where, it's like all of a sudden. So music is not just a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It allows this wonderful wash of emotion, but part of that opens you up to things like inspiration and creativity and new ideas. And all of this is just part of the process. It's like multi-dimensional in so many ways.
Yes. No, you're right. And I mean, probably everybody has experienced that to some degree on some level. I can relate to that too. I mean, there are lots of times where something comes on, like you said, and I know there's certain things that are going to evoke a certain emotion from me. And sometimes it's just sometimes it's just like the feeling that wells up, and sometimes it's directly connected to like, like a past memory where you have that association with that, a particular incident with that particular music. And sometimes it's energy. It's a really fun experiment, really, to sit down and listen to different music and then notice what it brings up in you. It's fascinating because it's so powerful.
Have you tried doing that, like with someone else? Have you done that together with someone?
Well, like not in the way that it was by design, but like, for example, I mean, if my husband and I are going to sit around, sit outside, have a glass of wine or something and turn on a particular playlist, we know that particular music and that playlist is going to put us in a certain state and a certain vibe. So it's happened it happens by just not on purpose, but it happens.
But it happens, yes.
Yeah. But I haven't ever to what you just said, decided to intentionally make it happen with a plan in mind.
The experience is wonderful, and you don't need a plan. So
I don't need a strategy.
Well, it's true. I mean, music is one of those amazing sort of external things. So as a creator, I'll bring this home in a second, but as a creator, one of my jobs is to make new stuff, right? I'm not just a problem solver. I solve problems too. But if I need a solution and it doesn't yet exist, I'm going to have to create that solution. So to do that, you have to create tension to find that solution. And the creative tension comes from taking a close look at where everything is, like being very honest about where things are, and then being very honest about what you want. And the tension between those two things opens the way to creation. Mm-hmm. And what happens when you're not looking at things honestly can make everything go wrong. So the difficult part there is being able to assess things very honestly. So if you and another person need to create a solution together or advance something together, whatever, one of the neatest ways to do that is to pick a piece of music that you've never heard before. Hopefully the other person hasn't either. And then have an honest conversation about what's in that music for each of you. And oftentimes you might find that your perspective on the music is sad and the other person's perspective on the music is angry or whatever. There might be contrast of some kind.
Yeah. Yes.
And both of you are right. And that's the cool thing. So by both of you being right, you've established an honest assessment of this thing, this music, that's accurate for both of you. And it's not because, one of you happens to be red and one happens to be blue or whatever. It's just that both of you hear it differently and experience the feelings differently. And oh my gosh, when you can relate to somebody else's emotion without judgment, say, oh my gosh, Bill, you felt sad by that piece, but it made me feel angry. Wow, is that an incredible starting point for whatever comes next? So in your creative process, you've set up this conflict, which is intentional, between sadness, in my case, and let's say anger in yours, that can promote the creation of a solution we never knew existed before.
That makes sense. Isn't
that wild?
Yeah.
And that's a practice that if you get, good at it with your team, you can apply to other things too. Because the exercise of doing that with music is the same exercise as if you're trying to invent a new way of, going to Mars or, figuring out what's for dinner tonight. I mean, there's so many incredible opportunities packed into that little object lesson that you can learn and practice with music.
Yeah, I get that. I can see that. That's what a fun experiment, though, to do with intention and get the different responses and emotions that are evoked from different people listening to the same music. That's a very, very cool experiment.
Non-judgmental too, because while it might be more difficult for me to say, that music that everybody else thinks is happy really made me angry, it's still an honest, authentic experience of the emotion in the music. And what do we all talk about? We want to be, have integrity and honesty and compassion and empathy and whatever. And here we are with this incredible tool that opens up authenticity and even empathy. Gosh, Bill, you're feeling scared. That is so amazing.
Right. And So it opens up opportunity for a more honest communication in which people would feel, I guess, more comfortable and safe expressing, because it's been, that was the whole idea. Right.
And you can sneak up on it. We haven't done this with the kids, but I've done this with homeless people, for example, that I teach music classes to. And it's awesome to unpack emotion that way and to find the common human thread in it.
Right. Yes. I mean, music of all things would be probably one of the most powerful ways to do that, when you think of it.
It's almost scary how powerful it is, because it's working on so much of us, from the emotional side, obviously, to the mental side, because, oh my gosh, you mean that little conversation can open up creation? Yup. Yup. It's great memory. I mean, we go on and on about this.
Right. Well, tell us, talking about some like homeless people and such, you tell us about seeking non-traditional audiences. So I know you've had audiences of, you said, homeless people that you teach, Alzheimer's patients, people struggling with physical or emotional injuries, stressed out people. It runs the gamut. So tell us about, the power of music as it relates to those audiences and how that is used as a tool. How do you use that as a tool with them?
Yes. So the idea of finding audiences that are non-traditional often means that I've been attempting in life to put a grand piano in places where there wouldn't normally be one, and then show up in a tuxedo and actually play it. And that's been a great opportunity, because people who are coming to see one of those sort of performance-based presentations will encounter a person who happens to also be a piano player, and take the time to explain how the music as a performer works on him and what it's like to actually present that music as the vehicle for doing it. And that's a fascinating thing, because people can sort of step into my shoes and see what it's like to sit on the bench and offer this music, and the mechanics of doing that, and the emotional response of doing that, and just all the other parts. So that's been a learning experience. And it's evolved for me. So if in a more of a workshop setting or a one-on-one kind of setting, working with the homeless music class or with veterans in recovery, we often find that it's not necessary to have the piano. You can get there with a flat screen and a playlist, and then begin to investigate our experience of emotion. And it's that same kind of thing that you do one-on-one, where you play a song and then figure out how you both feel about it. But oftentimes I've found that people really haven't given much thought or sort of inward focus on what they're really feeling when they hear music. So starting at the beginning and saying, hey, let's take a song you love and let's investigate what it says to you emotionally. That can be new too. And that's a whole different kind of a presentation, because, one of the things I got to do not long ago was start a presentation by playing the Star-Spangled Banner. I had a piano on the stage. And wow, is that not an emotionally charged piece of music these days?
Yeah. Yes.
Full of emotion. And everybody that experiences it has a slightly different flavor of emotion for it. And every one of those flavors is right. So coming to that and saying 100 people in the room are going to experience this song 100 different ways, let's see where those ways lead and how those feelings change our experience of this song. And then, of course, how that all connects us. Because, of course, when you play the Star-Spangled Banner, everybody stands up right away. Why is that? We learned to do that. So there's physical response to that song, too. And it's amazing to go into, do a keynote like that and have people kind of wondering what you're doing. And then when you ask them, oh, my gosh, how do you feel right now? What's coming up for you? Well, that sort of turns everything around in a way that if you went to the symphony and they played the Star Spangled Banner, it wouldn't, because the next thing would happen and the symphony played the next song. And here I am stopping to actually talk to people about what's happened. What's the emotional content for you? What does it make you feel? What does it make you want to do or think?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It is incredible. I know the Star Spangled Banner, when I hear that song, if I'm singing along, I can never even get past about 12 words. And then for some reason, and I can't even explain it, I get choked up and I just can't even, it makes me feel emotional in a good way. But I get choked up and I can no longer continue to even sing along, which I think is really interesting. And I can't really, I suppose if I sat and thought about it long enough and deeply enough, I would probably come up with some, authentic reasons, but it's just an interesting thing that happens with certain music. Same thing with Amazing Grace.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And having to perform that. So those songs affect me in a very similar way. And yet I have to keep going. I have to somehow make it to the end.
Yeah. How do you do that?
So, exactly. And that's a whole process in itself too, because as the one person making the sound in the room,
right?
you can't just stop.
Right.
And I've had that experience too, where I'm in the middle of some piece and I forget what the next thing is, and then I've got to figure it out and start again. But so those deep emotions that are part of who we all are part of us in different ways. I got to play one time when I was in England. I was traveling with a group of kids from my college. And there was a piano in the house we were staying in. They call university dormitories over there houses. You probably remember from Harry Potter. So there was a piano I was playing, and I was playing sort of mood music. It was slow and soft and stuff like that. And I found myself playing patriotic music, which of course had an interesting effect on the Americans in the room. And then one of the pieces that I love, it's also patriotic, very patriotic, is God Save the Queen. And we know it as Our Country to Thee. Mm-hmm. But I played God Save the Queen and then followed that up with, Amazing Grace and Danny Boy and some other songs. I think we were in Scotland. So it was appropriate that those songs were there. And what I observed in the room was that there was a deeper emotional response around the authentically UK tunes than there was around the American patriotic music, which was interesting to me. It was the year, I think, that the voters were deciding between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. And so we were very much in the not patriotic, but nationalistic kind of thought. We were all struggling with how to vote. So it was an interesting time to watch the music have an effect that surprised me, actually.
Sure.
I was surprised by my own emotional response to the music.
So fascinating.
And isn't that cool? And we don't often, as a culture in America, stop and listen sort of communally to what music does for us. Fortunately, at sports ball games, we can hear the Star Spangled Banner frequently. But other than maybe in church, how often do we hear music in a communal setting that is meant to move us deeply in some way? Yeah.
That's true. I remember the very first time I ever went to a concert, and I think I was like 18 the first time I went to a concert. And I remember it was a Bob Seger concert.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Nice.
And I remember I had never experienced anything like that. Obviously it was huge. And I remember feeling literally physically sensations that I had never felt before because of all of the music and the energy of all of these people all in this one gigantic, massive, auditorium. Yeah. And I remember looking around, even at that age of 18, going, all of these people are all in the same state right now. And the person on stage could literally influence the crowd because of the state that they're in due to their love of the music that person is putting out. I just remember thinking, wow, that person has a lot of power and influence up there because they are literally manipulating the state of everybody in the audience. I mean, not in a negative way. I mean, there was power there.
No, you said it. It's absolutely true. The concert is set up to manipulate us through a very satisfying emotional journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was fascinating. But then that was the first time that I started to become so aware of the power of music and how it affects you and what you're thinking and feeling, or what you're feeling and then thinking, whichever. But,
yeah, they're very connected. So what I teach is how you can give yourself that same experience of that amazing concert experience. It's available to everyone, and you can give it to yourself with what I call a 4-song silver bullet playlist for any emotion that you need.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I have certain songs that I use for meditation. So if I'm not able to just quiet my mind and chill and relax quietly, then I'll use the meditation music to help me be able to do that and sort of put me in that state that I'm looking for. And it usually works. Sometimes I don't need the music.
That's so perfect.
Yeah.
No, that's so perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So I have those kinds of playlists, and they're short on purpose. So that I can become emotionally prepared for whatever it is that I need, whether that's responding to a trigger, because we all have them, or preparing to move forward in some sort of growth-oriented way, like you're doing with meditation.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. You're right. I mean, why wouldn't a person make different, separate playlists for the purpose of helping put them in the state of mind or state of being that they want to be in for whatever the thing is that they're going to be doing next?
You want to get real deep into the weeds on this?
Well, why not? We're here.
Yeah, we're here.
Right?
So human beings have superpowers, and one of them is we remember songs really well. Once a melody gets in there, it's yours. It belongs to you. It's like it becomes a part of you.
Yeah.
And there's no learning involved with that. It's just we do it, especially if it's songs we love. They're just in there. I bet anybody right now could come up with about 10 songs that they love, and they'd know how they sound.
Right.
Probably more. So here's the science. Once you know a song at that level, you no longer need to hear it for your system to respond to it. I'll say that again.
Right.
Once you know a song well, you no longer need to hear it for your system to respond to it. So think of the last earworm that you had. No, don't. No, it's too late. but right now, if you're listening to this, think of a song that you love, and then let it start to play in your mind, and you'll notice that the emotional content of that song is immediately available to you.
Well, that's true. That's true, because the mind doesn't know, what's really happening, the difference between what's happening outside of you and what's happening in your mind. It's going to evoke the same chemical reactions and emotional responses as though it's really happening.
You said it. Yep. And your mind is a little late. The emotions start actually 100 times earlier than the mind that figures them out. It's crazy brain science, but when we hear things, they enter our ear, our systems begin to respond immediately because our lizard brain deals with sound. So our system is all ready for fight, flight, freeze, or mate, or feed, way before we recognize that we heard a sound that might have been either dangerous or pleasant. The cerebral cortex is catching up, but it's a lot later. So it literally takes about 100 times longer for us to think about what we heard. But by that time, we're already ready to go. We're already emotionally engaged. Our systems have already responded. The adrenaline's hit, or what the dopamine or serotonin, whatever it is, it's already started to prime us, to do what we need to do. So same response, as you said so perfectly, it isn't a matter of thinking.
Right, right. We feel it, and it's just there. We're ready to go.
And, all the great stuff, all the best practices out there, for how we're supposed to get along in the world, the compassion and kindness and respect and honor and all that stuff, we don't have to think about those things. They're feelings.
Well, yeah.
I mean, if you can soundtrack your gratitude, for example, there's this great song that it's a choral piece that began to hear about a year ago. It's called Grateful. And it's this amazing little piece of choral music, and it is my gratitude song. So when I hear Grateful, Grateful, the name of the song, I just get this feeling that is my gratitude feeling. And I can't really explain that in terms of, thinking. It's a feeling that I have. So if I need to come up with gratitude and I'm not feeling grateful, all I got to do is let Grateful, Grateful play in my head. And I'm immediately feeling grateful. And as I feel that, I've had a lot of practice, I almost get this emotion of gratitude. Not the kind you get, the kind you give, right?
Yes, the kind you give. Exactly. That's I don't know. I love this. I love this subject. So, okay, let me, I want to get to a couple of other things here too, so I don't forget them. I know that you do a lot of work with veterans, which I think is amazing. Tell me about that and how you work with veterans with your music.
Oh, veterans are so amazing because they've given us a conversation about post-traumatic stress that we never would have had. Thanks to 9/11 and post 9/11 veterans. And they're even talking about it now in the VA research circles as post-traumatic growth. It's the recognition that, trauma is sort of a necessary part of how we grow as people. We need those experiences. And if we use them brightly and leverage them, we can make so much change happen in a positive way. So I didn't know anything about that when I volunteered for Guitars for Vets. But there I was, piano player, helping veterans to learn to play the guitar because playing music relieves the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And there's a study about that, and that's fascinating. And Guitars for Vets is this huge nationwide nonprofit, and they do amazing things for so many veterans. You learn to play the guitar after 10 lessons. They give you a brand new guitar and all the fixings, so you've got a way of keeping yourself post-traumatic stress symptoms under control using music for the rest of your life. It's amazing stuff. And of course, from where I'm coming from, I'm like, well, why not? Of course you can give yourself relief. That's what Music Care is all about. So watching veterans, though, change. So the amazing thing about people who have been in very traumatic situations is that they have a bigger response when you're offered relief than the average bear does. I mean, all of us experience trauma. But if your trauma is related to combat and you've lost limbs or you have invisible wounds, those things, the bigger they are, the better they respond, I guess is a good way of saying it. I had a veteran show up one day at Veterans Village. We were, about a year into the program. This guy came in. Most of the people who arrive at Veterans Village have been homeless and are addicted in some way or abusing substances. So it's residential treatment and recovery. And this guy came in and wanted to be a part of the program. We handed him a practice guitar, and he sat down on a wall beside the little fountain in the courtyard there and started playing. And it turns out this guy probably knows a couple thousand songs by heart. Dylan, Seeger, yes, Bob Seeger, the Beatles, the Stones, Kinks, whatever. And he just sat there and played and played and played. And I didn't know what we were going to do for him because he was doing it all for himself. He was unpacking years of not having had a guitar to let feelings go.
Yeah. Wow, that's so powerful. You must have had like chills.
Oh, I get chills talking about it. And it's a longer story, so I'll shorten it for our purposes here, but I was invited to play in the band that this guy formed. I was the only non-veteran in the band, and we played at recovery events all over San Diego and just had a great time. And then he graduated the program, and everybody moved along. And I lost track of him. He fell off the wagon, and from what I heard from other people in the homeless community, they'd seen him once or twice. He was playing on the beach, just sort of trying to hold it together and support his habit. And then he pretty much disappeared for about a year. And none of us knew what had happened to him. Of course, when you play in a band, you get close, and you know one another in a way that's beyond just casual acquaintances or even business acquaintances that you work with all the time.
Sure, it's got to be like family.
It's family. You're making music. You're opening to emotional and all of the, the interplay that goes on between the band members is nonverbal. and it's related to music intimately. You get to know people in that way, and so I really missed this guy, and I really feared that we'd lost him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on my birthday, which I actually share with this guy, that I was at Veterans Village and happened to be just there for some other reason, walking down the pathway. Coming toward me is this guy.
Oh.
The guy had been my band leader, right? And we just ran and gave each other this giant bear hug and wished each other happy birthday, of course.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And something had brought him back. I don't know, whatever it was, had brought him back. And I've been able to play on a few different occasions with him and a couple other guys from the band too. And it just feels like such a homecoming and such a positive thing to be a part of each other's process in life, which for some is more traumatic than others, but for all of us, it's a shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of need, I think, more than we know right now, Loree. It's if we could just find that musical connection, I think we'd be at a better place in this world. So that's just one veteran, and there have been so many
Sure.
that experience that.
Wow, that's just beautiful. It really, I'm so glad that there was I was hoping there was going to be an ending to that story where he showed up again.
Yeah, I know. I was hoping too, and there it was.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. You stated that music is a way that you can feel yourself safely, and I really like that statement. I don't know why I've never heard it put that way. And I guess you've probably already kind of covered some of that in what we've already been talking about, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about that. I just think it's really an interesting statement that it's just a way that you can feel yourself safely. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I believe all of us are so full of ability to experience emotion, and that our culture, for whatever reason, doesn't really allow that as much as we could. We like to go to concerts, right? Because it's safe there. But sitting here in the chair with the headphones on, I can put on music and experience it without any requirement to do anything with it. So that music can frighten me, and we like to go to scary movies, and the music is part of that. Or that music can make me angry, and there's been a lot of great things that have come from anger. Once the edge is off, right? Mm-hmm. It's a sort of a mantra, or maybe mantra is the wrong word, but in martial arts, you never attack in anger. Now that doesn't say you never be angry, but to use the energy of anger to attack is a mistake.
Right.
One has to feel the anger and then allow the positive energy of anger to create movement, rather than just going crazy with any kind of random energy that's in anger. Because anger and fear are pretty, they're boisterous,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not about controlling them, it's about allowing them.
So
as we talked about early, you allow it, and you've got the energy available without the random, energy that could scatter you, to focus in and bring that anger to a successful conclusion somehow.
Yeah, so that kind of is part of, I think you actually just kind of answered my next question. It was something that I read that you had said that there's a positive energy available in that fear and that distress and that anger. And, that energy, how could we use that for good? How could we leverage that energy that's behind those types of emotions that would be considered negative emotions, like, fear and anger and sadness? How do we use that and leverage it, for fuel and so that we can use it to accomplish something good or positive?
Well, it starts with allowing the energy. To remove judgment from emotions is difficult at first, because there are definitely emotions that we like more than others, and that's fine. But there's also power in those big emotions, that if you take the judgment away from them, and with that taking away the requirement to do anything with the energy and just experience it, I mean, you have to start slow. This is big stuff. So keeping yourself in a place where you can experience anger safely until you understand what it feels like to feel that much anger or feel that much sadness, that's a new concept. I didn't know what it felt like to be that sad until I felt like there was a time in my life where I needed to end it all. And allowing myself to be with sad music that's always been there for me, one piece of music did it. And just to be with that for hours, it took hours to let that sadness flow. It opened the way. It created that creative tension, as a matter of fact, that I needed to solve a problem. It was a big problem that I needed to solve. And I didn't actually set out to solve a problem or do anything new. I set out to say, I'm here, I'm really sad. I'm going to listen to some music that allows me to let this sadness move without any expectation of what comes next, and just be with that music. That was the thing that opened it up. And that works for anger or fear or even happiness. You can be, incredibly happy with happy music. Imagine how happy you could be, right?
Yeah.
Letting that play.
That's interesting. That's like something that I need to really think about. For myself, because I am always like, like for instance, feeling sad, it's just something that I'm like, I don't do sad. I don't want to do sad. So I do things that pull me out of that. You know what I mean? Is like
Sure.
Quickly as I can. And for me, usually it's something physical. If I do something physical, like if I go and run or ride a bike or work out and there's that physical energetic expression usually brings me back to neutral. But which to me is great. That works really well. But I'm willing to consider that maybe there are times when allowing that sadness to just be there and feel that for a while, maybe that's not such a bad thing. But my own, for myself, that's what I need to contemplate or think about.
Well, it makes sense. And the language, we live in a binary world, let's face it. So our language is very either or and night or dark or whatever, light or dark. And that's okay, but it's just programming. If we as human beings have this amazing capability to feel things, and there's a big four. People have talked about 8, 4, 6, whatever, but sadness, joy, anger, and fear, we'll just stick with 4. If that's our emotional range, and we, for some reason, decide that we don't want to feel half of it, we're cutting ourselves off from half of our power. Half of our superpowers are no longer available just by choice, right? And I know that there are people in the world who are capable of doing amazing things with sadness because you hear their music.
Right.
And that is one of the, I guess in the creative world, that is one of the hallmarks of a creative person is they are somehow able to pull all of their emotional content into something that the rest of us can see. Whether they're a musician on stage or an artist or a sculptor or a writer,
right.
They have that sort of built-in responsibility to be faithful to the emotions that come up and to offer us brand new content that's never been seen, heard, or felt before based on those emotions. So that's a huge invitation, and artists basically do that, creators basically do that for no other reason than we have to. If anyone resonates for that, well, that's an amazing thing, and you wind up with, people flocking to see the Beatles or Ariana Grande or Bob Seger, whoever it happens to be.
Yeah.
For the emotional content that's there, there's something about that experience that people need.
Yeah. There's the human connection there. That everyone has experienced those emotions, or people that are experiencing the same emotions that are, being expressed in the music.
Sure. And it doesn't always take music because, here in California now, we have all these wildfires, and sometimes it's fear that unites us. And people do amazing things, like the folks with Airbnbs are opening up their Airbnbs for anyone who needs a place to stay while they're evacuated.
Yeah.
That's an amazing response to fear. There's also response to sadness. I don't remember when Kennedy was shot, but I know the music that was used then. And that music has appeared in so many ways worldwide, wherever there's been a need for people to experience communal grief. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing to grieve together in some ways. I remember when 9/11 happened, and I don't remember any music around that, but I do remember things like the earthquake in Haiti and how music was their resilience. People in Haiti had nothing except music, and they danced in the streets. And in New Orleans, after Katrina, the second line parades that happened, people were also dancing in the streets. It was music that came to mind us. Mm-hmm. And then I remember just recently, so when Notre Dame was burning, remember those amazing videos of Parisians standing in the streets and singing?
Yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's almost like it besides the connection, it brings a measure of strength, so that it helps people, maybe it helps to keep you at times in certain circumstances from maybe crumbling at the knees, Right. Yeah. So.
And you're there, with other people.
Right.
Who are also experiencing something that they didn't want, but they're sharing the experience in a way that is meaningful.
Yeah. I know you have a going rogue story for me.
Ah.
I'm not gonna let you go without sharing it.
Oh gosh, I am.
Are you willing?
Yes. Yes, of course. Okay. So I'm a rebel. I mean, let's face it, people. Most creatives are in some way, but I'm also the kind of rebel that has to, that realizes that I've got to keep a roof over my head and food on the table and stuff like that. And there are times where that's just not easy to do. And this particular story has nothing to do with music, but it has everything to do with realizing your authentic self. In my case, my authentic self. I've always worked for startups, and I had a very well-meaning mentor encourage me one time when I was still early in my career to work for IBM. IBM is the place. That's you go, you work there for your entire career, and they take care of you. Although I learned recently, or shortly after that, I learned that IBM actually stands for I've been moved. It's like being in the military. You've got to be willing to go anywhere they want you.
Wow.
But that ethos was fine. I mean, I grew up in a family that was ready to jump to it for whatever purpose was required. Lots of military members in my family. So I had the idea, and I pursued it. It was one of those things. You decide you're going to do it, and you figure out how to make it happen, and you chase it until you actually get the job. And I did. I managed to get the job working at IBM as a marketing representative trainee, which was just like the top of the list as far as I was concerned. I thought I'd made it. And then I got there and started to go to IBM marketing school and had the blue suit and the rep tie and everything else. And about 6 or 9 months in, oh my gosh, I was not happy. I didn't fit. I was effective. I had all this amazing startup knowledge, and computers were brand new. Personal computer was brand new back in those days. And it was the holy grail at IBM, man. That the personal computer was going to be the future. Mm-hmm. Except that some people at IBM didn't think so. And there was this conflict that I became aware of between the people who thought that mainframes were the thing and people who thought that PCs were the thing. And I found myself not even wanting to try, in the middle of that conflict. And the craziest things started to happen. People started to leave the company. So I'm thinking to myself, why is this? This is the greatest place to work in the world. How come people are leaving? Here I am just starting. I'm thinking this is going to be my life, and everybody's leaving. And it got my attention in a way that was strange. And what it felt like was that, I don't belong here. I just don't belong here. Here I've made this entire effort to go in this great direction that I thought was the right thing to do, and I don't belong. And I was barely, 9 months in when I decided that I needed to quit. And I went to the guy who had helped me get the job, literally an IBM, account executive had helped me get the job. And I said to him, this isn't the right place for me. I have to leave. And he looked at me funny, and basically said, okay, Bill, if that's what you need to do, we'll make it happen. And for whatever reason, everybody thought that I was leaving this company. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. I was going to go rogue. I was going to go back to sort of my startup roots and be the person that I knew I could be effective without having to deal with all of the huge company politics, not have to wear a blue suit anymore. Just, do something that was authentically me. And if you've ever been in one of those business situations before and you realize, no, this is not where I fit, and you've had to make the choice to take yourself out of it, oh, it's huge. It is overwhelming.
Yeah.
To have to do that. And for no other reason than you don't fit. It wasn't a principle thing, it wasn't a protest thing, there was no other reason for me to go except that I knew somewhere deep inside that I wasn't blue enough for IBM.
Yeah. So and it looks weird to other people. It's hard for other people, I imagine, to understand because you've put, like you said, all of this time and effort. You chased it. Somebody helped you. You finally get there. It's solid. There's you can see a future, and there's certainty there, and there's safety and certainty in that. And then all of a sudden you go. Especially if you don't have a plan, you just go, no, I'm going to walk away. So it looks like to other people, it looks like you're kind of crazy.
Yep. Oh yeah. I'm still living that one down. And it's been, I don't know, that was in the 80s. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. But had I not done that, I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing now.
There you go.
Hindsight being 20/20, but also when you're in the middle of it, there's no way to have hindsight. And it brought home for me the one most important thing about this entire story is staying present. And this is where it gets musical, because there's nothing that I know of like music to keep you present. You have to be with it while it's playing in the moment. You can't be somewhere else. And if you're thinking about anything else, you're missing it. And music, especially if you're the one making it, brings you fully 100% into the moment. And that's a really useful place to spend your time.
You're so right about that. I had that experience lately. I decided to try some dance lessons. I've never had dance lessons in my life, and I always wanted to. And so I signed up for a few lessons at a place nearby. And I'll tell you what, when the music came on and we started doing those first few steps and I started to get a little bit of flow going. And so I kind of knew a little bit about what we were doing so I could just kind of relax and feel it. The power of the music was overwhelming. It was, and I was completely present. I couldn't think, because I had to think a little bit about, remembering what I was doing and listening to the music. And it just brought me so present, so into the now. I couldn't think about anything that I had to do later or tomorrow. I couldn't think about anything that I was previously doing. Nothing but what am I doing right now in this moment and feeling, because of the obviously the power of the music combined with the dancing. It was so wonderful that I literally was like, I'm going to well up here. My instructor's going to look at me like, what's wrong with you, lady? She's falling apart. And I kind of had to just, swallow and smile to myself, because I was like, it just felt so good. And I knew that's what it was. I was just completely present in the moment, and it felt amazing. Like there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. You just lose all sense of everything else for that little bit of time, and it's wonderful.
Who doesn't want to live that way,
Yeah, right. I know. I find that our pets do that to us as well if we pay attention to them. They keep us in the now. They bring your attention to just like they're just right here, right now. And if you kind of tap into what they're probably, as a pet, like your dog or your cat, just thinking it's just about, what feels really good right now. It's kind of like
I
a
get
powerful thing too, right?
People make fun of the therapy animals and whatever, but I've seen it up close and personal, especially with veterans.
I bet.
It's amazing what a pet can do to keep you in the game.
Yes. I know that you were honored in Washington, D.C. for helping people use music to cope with their mental illness. So I have to ask, how did you feel and what were you thinking when you received that honor? That's pretty cool.
Wow. That was an incredible moment. They do this thing every year. So National Council of Behavioral Health finds maybe about several hundred people, 300-400 people, I think there were, that are nominated. And then they choose from that the 18 to 20 people that'll receive awards. And sometimes it's an organization, the whole organization is recognized, and sometimes it's an individual. So I was recognized as an individual. And they have this event, and literally there are, 5,000 people having dinner during the awards ceremony in this enormous convention center. And it's overwhelming. It is just, it's overwhelming that many people are there to show appreciation for the new creative ways of dealing with mental illness. So, and I think I might have been like the first one on stage, maybe the second. I was early in the program. But at the moment of being there, they, of course, have, you're instructed how to prepare your speech. You get 90 seconds to say something. And the only thing that I could think of to say during that 90 seconds, which I thought of it a long time before, of course, and then they okayed it, and then we rehearsed it, and everything was like to the T. I had to say thank you to my mom. Isn't that crazy? But Mom was my first piano teacher, so it made sense. And I actually got to perform. I got to play a piece of ragtime that night. So I played this crazy piece of ragtime and accepted the award and thanked my mom. But she had this idea that behavioral health was something that musicians had an advantage in. We learn these practices of focus and listening to the sounds we make and just all the things that it takes to make music well. Mom discovered you could teach them to little kids, and the little kids who learn those things would do so much better in school, which research now sort of sustains that. But Mom loved to teach little kids who had attention deficit issues or hyperactive issues. And she'd teach them for 5 minutes, and then the next kid would come and sit on the bench, and everybody would watch that kid go through their process. And I realized when this award came through that it was that I've been practicing those same kinds of skills for as long as Mom had taught me, and then because you can't stop, for the rest of my life ever since. And that's such a huge part of behavioral health, is having practices that allow you to focus, to be in the moment, to process things well. That all the stuff that goes along with being a human being can be taught musically.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what can we just, a couple of ideas like that we've talked about a few of them, and maybe we'll just recap those, or if you have a couple other ones, just some tips for listeners. How can we, for using music very, specifically or directly as a tool and a resource like that to help them with their, process feelings and just feel like they're okay?
I think the biggest one from our conversation anyway is the idea of allowing whatever the feeling is without judging it. There may be times where you can't get to the music right away, like somebody cuts you off in traffic and the road rage sparks up or whatever. Take some time later on to put on some angry music and allow that anger to process. And you may discover that your initial response was only one of a variety of responses you could have had. Maybe the person didn't see you. Okay, that's fine. Or they were distracted, not so great. But maybe they were trying to get to the hospital to visit with a friend who had been taken to the emergency room or, whatever. There's so many possibilities that we can't know.
Yeah.
But allowing that anger also opens the way for compassion. And that practice, I think, more than anything else, of just taking time to be with an emotion that you don't like and putting some music to help, that's really powerful, and it has the potential to open up so many other things. There's also there's so many ways you can go with this, of course, but if you know anything about EMDR and you're listening, or you don't and you want to, eye movement desensitization, can never say that right, and reprocessing, EMDR Institute, I think, online. You can learn about the power of what they call bilateral stimulation and how that can release the sort of negative energy from memory. This is great for post-traumatic stress. But musicians and anybody who plays the hand drums, or even if you're just tapping on your shoulders, you can do this. But musicians whose job is big emotion are doing EMDR all the time. And it's fascinating to me that little component of me playing the piano growing up has now got science behind it, and explanations for what you can do with it, and results from people who are in terrible trauma that are able to recover from that well. And so that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many of these little practices that musicians learn that now have science that shows how beneficial they are for many, many reasons.
Sure.
So there's a couple.
Yeah, that's awesome. You were doing it and you didn't even realize what you were doing when you were little. Wow.
Yeah, and yet it helped. It was there. It was helping mind me.
Wonderful. Bill, where can people find out more about you and connect with you? Share your website and anything else that you would like us to know about what you're up to.
Sure. The simplest way to find me is at quest.musiccare.net. And Quest is the old-fashioned quest for the Holy Grail spelling, Quest. Music Care with 2 C's.net. And there's free stuff there and ways to engage. And of course, once you get there, there's a picture of me and my name. You can also Google me then and find all kinds of stuff. It's been quite a ride, and the internet's been very kind. I'm all over the place.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. And musiccare.net, of course, is there, and there'll be show notes and things. But start with quest.musiccare.net, and that is also a portal to the online, self-directed, gamified, fully mentored course. Yeah, I know we have to do all of that in one breath, but
wow, yeah,
I love guiding people through this process, and so that was the only way I could do it. If you want to sign into that, we can do that. If you're a veteran listening to this now, or a military member, or friend and family of someone who is, that course is available for free. Just contact me, because it's important to give back to people who've pledged their lives to our country. And I'm even thinking of opening that to first responders. These folks need it most. So quest.musiccare.net. Reach out. I'm there.
Quest. I'm going to put that in the show notes. So quest.musiccare. I'm going to write that down just so I don't, as a reminder, .net. Okay. That's wonderful. And I think it's amazing that you are offering that complimentary to vets. That's fantastic. I'm going to let you go after one more question, Bill.
Okay.
What would you like to share with our listeners about the value of going rogue?
Oh my gosh, it's a great place to be. Welcome aboard. So we started out with laughing about how shift happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that takes some courage. I'll be honest with you. It's not, it isn't all happy, smiley faces being rogue, being the outlier. But there are great people there. There's amazing things. In fact, there's even a group that's getting started called the Real Outliers that I learned about. So it's great to be on the leading edge. It's also a little dangerous. It's a little scary. A lot of the times it isn't a lot of fun, but being there and helping to open the envelope and advocate for other people to come along too and all of that, that's being rogue. And that's a wonderful thing. That is just amazing. And the world needs rogues. So let's do that.
I like it. It's always fun to hear what everyone always has a different take on, their idea of the value of going rogue. So it's always interesting to hear what my guest is going to say when they answer that. And I love what you said. It was very unique. Being out on the leading edge, fun and scary, and it takes courage. I think that's pretty appropriate, I'd say. Totally. Going rogue sounds like, I'm going to be a badass. I'm going to go rogue, I'm going to do it. But there's a lot that goes into that, There's a lot.
Is.
It's risky. It's risk-taking.
But that's where we get our Stephen Coveys and our,
Yes.
the people who really get into this and offer us a way forward that's not the standard old way. Like I'm Tony Robbins. I mean, think about all the people who are out there doing amazing work right now.
Yes.
By
Totally.
going rogue.
Exactly. By being willing to take a risk, have the courage to possibly fail, but you're just going to go for it. That's how, you're right. That's how shift happens and innovation happens. I like it. Bill, you have been delightful, and I am so glad. I know that there's just a ton more that we could cover, but this is probably all anyone could absorb in an hour. We've covered, or over an hour, we've covered a lot of stuff, and I am so grateful for your time. Thank you so, so much for sharing everything you shared with us today.
Thank you, Loree. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you or anybody who happens to connect with me over this conversation and continue it.
That would be wonderful. Let's do it again.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. Have a wonderful evening.
You too, Loree.
Like many other alternative forms of healing and treating various health conditions, music as self-care is an idea whose time has definitely come. I think it's on its way to being recognized as the next big thing in healing and self-care. And we can be grateful to Bill's passion, or for Bill's passion, I should say, in being a leader in this initiative and bringing it to the masses. He's doing amazing things. Remember, you can find Bill online and contact him directly by going to quest.musiccare.net. I also believe you can find him at billprotzmann.com. And that's a wrap for today, you guys. So thank you for spending some of your valuable time hanging out with us. It is genuinely appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And I would just love it if you would take a quick second to leave me a rating. If you're trying to make some shift happen in your life and could use a little help, you can find out what private coaching with me is all about on LoreeBischoff.com. And of course, find me on any of the social media platforms. Until next week, stay feisty, my friends, and go make some shift happen. You too, Gary V.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.